The sound of rotor blades cutting through the afternoon air made everyone in our suburban neighborhood stop what they were doing. Windows opened, dogs barked, and children pointed at the sky as a military helicopter descended toward our modest two-story house on Maple Street. But what happened next would change everything my father thought he knew about his daughter. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Sarah Michelle Rodriguez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates spent their weekends at the mall or scrolling through social media, she was studying tactical manuals and practicing combat drills in the abandoned warehouse behind the old textile factory. At 19, she possessed a level of discipline and focus that most adults envied, though her father, Miguel Rodriguez, saw it as nothing more than an expensive phase that would eventually pass. Miguel owned a small auto repair shop in the industrial district of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. He was a practical man who believed in hard work, honest wages, and keeping your feet firmly planted on the ground. Dreams, in his opinion, were luxuries that working-class families couldn't afford. When Sarah announced she was joining the Civil Air Patrol, Miguel had rolled his eyes and muttered something about wasted time and government nonsense. The Rodriguez family had immigrated from El Salvador when Miguel was just 12 years old. His parents had sacrificed everything to give their children opportunities they never had, working multiple jobs and saving every penny. Miguel inherited their work ethic, but also their skepticism of anything that seemed too good to be true. Military service, to him, was something for other people's children, kids whose families had connections or money to burn. Sarah's younger brother, Danny, was everything Miguel had hoped for in a son. He worked at the shop after school, showed genuine interest in the business, and talked about taking over when Miguel retired. Danny was grounded, predictable, and followed the path that made sense. Sarah, on the other hand, had always been the wild card. From an early age, Sarah displayed an unusual fascination with aviation and military history. While other kids played with dolls or video games, she built model aircraft and memorized the specifications of fighter jets. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of the Blue Angels and vintage warplanes from World War II. Miguel tolerated these interests as harmless childhood curiosities, assuming she would outgrow them like most kids outgrow their obsession with dinosaurs or princesses. But Sarah never outgrew anything. If anything, her interests became more focused and intense as she entered her teenage years. She excelled in mathematics and physics, subjects that came naturally to her analytical mind. Her teachers consistently praised her leadership qualities and recommended her for advanced programs, but Miguel remained unconvinced that any of it would lead to practical employment. The first real conflict came when Sarah was 16 and announced she wanted to attend a summer aviation camp in Colorado. The program cost $2,000, money the family didn't have to spare. Miguel had worked overtime for months to save for a new transmission lift for the shop, and he wasn't about to spend it on what he considered an overpriced vacation. "Mija, you need to be realistic," he had told her during a heated dinner conversation. "These camps are for rich kids whose parents can afford to throw money away. We have bills to pay and a business to run." Sarah had argued passionately about the educational opportunities and the career connections she could make, but Miguel remained firm. She would spend the summer working at the shop like Danny, learning skills that would actually serve her in the real world. The conversation ended with Sarah storming out of the house and not speaking to her father for 3 days. Despite the setbacks, Sarah refused to abandon her dreams. She took a part-time job at the local diner, working evenings and weekends to save money for her own aviation pursuits. Every dollar she earned went toward flying lessons at the small municipal airport 20 miles outside of town. Miguel discovered this when he found receipts hidden in her backpack, leading to another explosive argument. "You're throwing away money we don't have on a hobby that will never pay the bills," he shouted, his frustration boiling over. "Flying is for people who already have everything they need. We're not those people, Sarah. We never will be." But Sarah saw something in aviation that her father couldn't understand. For her, flying wasn't just about the mechanics of controlling an aircraft. It was about the infinite possibilities that opened up when you lifted off the ground. Every hour she spent in the cockpit reinforced her belief that she was meant for something bigger than Millbrook's narrow horizons. The tension between father and daughter reached its peak during Sarah's senior year of high school. College acceptance letters had started arriving, including several offers from prestigious universities with strong aerospace programs. Sarah had applied for every scholarship available and had been accepted to 3 different ROTC programs. The opportunity to pursue her dreams while receiving a quality education seemed within reach. Miguel, however, saw the college acceptances as confirmation of his worst fears. Sarah was being lured away from her family and her responsibilities by institutions that would fill her head with unrealistic expectations. He had seen it happen to other families in the neighborhood, kids who went away to college and never came back, leaving their parents to wonder where they had gone wrong. "College is fine if you're studying something useful," Miguel had said during a family meeting. "Business, accounting, nursing, these are careers with security. But you want to study aerospace engineering so you can fly around in the clouds all day? That's not a career, Mija, that's a fantasy." The final straw came when Sarah announced her intention to join the Civil Air Patrol while still in high school. The CAP was a civilian auxiliary of the United States Air Force, offering young people opportunities to learn about aviation, emergency services, and leadership. For Sarah, it represented everything she had been working toward: a chance to serve her community while developing the skills she would need for a military career. Miguel's reaction was swift and harsh. He forbade Sarah from joining, threatening to cut off her financial support if she defied him. The uniform, he declared, was a costume that would make her the laughingstock of the neighborhood. No daughter of his would parade around playing soldier while there was real work to be done. But Sarah had inherited more than just Miguel's work ethic. She had also inherited his stubborn determination. On her 18th birthday, she walked into the CAP recruitment office and signed up without her father's knowledge or permission. When the uniform arrived by mail 2 weeks later, Miguel discovered it while bringing in packages from the front porch. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything the Rodriguez family had ever experienced. Miguel held up the crisp blue uniform with its patches and insignia, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Neighbors walking by could hear the shouting from 3 houses away as Miguel demanded to know how Sarah could humiliate the family with such foolishness. "This is what you've been wasting your time on?" he yelled, shaking the uniform in front of her face. "Playing dress-up like a little girl who wants to be a soldier? Do you have any idea how ridiculous you look in this thing?" Sarah stood her ground, her jaw set with the same determination that had driven her to work double shifts at the diner to pay for flying lessons. She explained that the Civil Air Patrol was a serious organization that provided real emergency services, including search and rescue operations and disaster relief. The training was rigorous, the standards were high, and the opportunities for advancement were based on merit and performance. Miguel wasn't interested in hearing about merit or performance. All he could see was his daughter throwing away her future on a pipe dream that would leave her disappointed and unemployed. The uniform represented everything he feared about Sarah's inability to face reality and accept the limitations of their circumstances. The argument escalated when Sarah revealed that she had already completed her first training weekend and had been selected for advanced leadership development. She pulled out a folder containing certificates and commendations, evidence of her rapid progress within the organization. Her instructors had praised her natural leadership abilities and had recommended her for specialized training programs that could lead to significant opportunities. Miguel barely glanced at the documents before dismissing them as meaningless pieces of paper. Anyone could print official-looking certificates, he argued, and the fact that Sarah had been selected for special programs only proved that the organization was desperate for recruits. Real accomplishments, he insisted, were measured in paychecks and job security, not trophies and ribbons. The conversation took an even more painful turn when Miguel began questioning Sarah's judgment and maturity. He suggested that she was being manipulated by recruiters who preyed on young people's fantasies about military service. The uniform, he said, was bait designed to hook impressionable teenagers who didn't understand the difference between playing war and fighting real battles. Sarah tried to explain that her involvement with the Civil Air Patrol was just the beginning of a carefully planned career path. She had researched military academy admissions requirements, spoken with active duty officers about career opportunities, and developed a timeline for achieving her goals. This wasn't a childhood fantasy, it was a serious commitment backed by concrete preparation and realistic expectations. But Miguel had heard enough. He declared that as long as Sarah lived under his roof, she would not wear the uniform or participate in any CAP activities. If she wanted to play soldier, she could find somewhere else to live, and someone else to support her ridiculous dreams. The ultimatum hung in the air like a challenge, forcing Sarah to choose between her family's approval and her own aspirations. The weeks that followed were marked by cold silence and careful avoidance. Sarah continued attending school and working at the diner, but she moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only when spoken to and avoiding any mention of her plans. Miguel told himself that he was protecting his daughter from making a terrible mistake, but the distance between them felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. Danny tried to mediate between his sister and father, but his efforts only highlighted the fundamental disagreement that separated them. He understood Miguel's concerns about practicality and financial security, but he also recognized Sarah's exceptional abilities and dedication. The family seemed trapped in a standoff that neither side knew how to resolve. Meanwhile, Sarah's CAP unit continued to meet and train without her. Her absence was noted by the commanding officers, who had identified her as one of the most promising cadets in the squadron's recent history. When Cadet Master Sergeant Jennifer Walsh called to check on Sarah's status, she learned about the family conflict and offered to speak with Miguel directly. The phone call between Jennifer and Miguel was brief and unproductive. Jennifer attempted to explain the Civil Air Patrol's mission and the valuable training opportunities it provided, but Miguel remained convinced that the entire organization was designed to exploit young people's naivete. He thanked Jennifer for her concern but made it clear that Sarah would not be returning to the program. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. What Miguel didn't know was that Sarah had made an impression that extended far beyond her local CAP squadron. Her performance during the leadership training weekend had been exceptional enough to catch the attention of regional commanders, who had flagged her file for potential advancement to national programs. Her test scores, leadership evaluations, and demonstrated commitment placed her in the top percentile of cadets nationwide. The standoff at home continued for another month, with Sarah growing increasingly frustrated and Miguel becoming more entrenched in his position. Neither of them could have predicted that the resolution to their conflict would come from a source neither had anticipated, and that it would arrive with the thunderous sound of rotor blades cutting through the quiet afternoon air above Maple Street. The UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter settled onto the Rodriguez family's front lawn with practiced precision, its powerful rotors creating a whirlwind that sent autumn leaves spiraling through the air like confetti. Miguel emerged from underneath the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Honda Civic, his oil-stained coveralls and bewildered expression making him look like a man who had just stepped into an alternate reality. "What in God's name?" he muttered, wiping his hands on a shop rag as neighbors began gathering along the sidewalk. The Hendersons from next door had abandoned their Saturday afternoon barbecue, standing in their backyard with spatulas in hand, staring at the military aircraft that had just landed in suburban Pennsylvania like something out of a movie. Sarah burst through the front door, her face a mixture of confusion and recognition. She had been upstairs in her room, working on calculus homework, while trying to ignore the persistent ache of her father's disapproval, when the unmistakable sound of military rotors had drawn her to the window. Now watching as uniformed personnel emerged from the aircraft, she felt her heart racing with possibilities she couldn't quite comprehend. Colonel Rebecca Martinez stepped down from the helicopter with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her dress blue uniform was immaculate despite the flight, and the silver eagles on her shoulders caught the afternoon sunlight as she approached the house. Behind her came Major David Chen, a younger officer whose tablet and serious expression suggested this was official business of the highest importance. "Mr. Miguel Rodriguez?" Colonel Martinez's voice carried easily over the gradually diminishing rotor noise. "I'm Colonel Martinez from the United States Air Force. We need to speak with you about your daughter, Sarah." Miguel's mouth went dry. In his experience, military personnel only showed up at your house to deliver bad news. His mind immediately jumped to the worst possible scenarios. Sarah had somehow gotten herself into serious trouble. Or worse, Someone in uniform was about to tell him that his stubborn, dreamy daughter had done something that would bring shame to the entire family. What has she done? Miguel's voice was barely above a whisper, his earlier anger replaced by a cold dread that settled in his stomach like a stone. Colonel Martinez smiled, a gesture that seemed to transform her entire demeanor from intimidating to almost maternal. "Mr. Rodriguez, your daughter hasn't done anything wrong. Quite the contrary, actually. We're here because Cadet Rodriguez has achieved something rather extraordinary." The use of Sarah's military title hit Miguel like a physical blow. He had spent months trying to convince himself that his daughter's involvement with the Civil Air Patrol was nothing more than an expensive hobby, a phase that would eventually run its course like her childhood fascination with horses or her brief interest in learning French. Hearing a full colonel refer to Sarah as Cadet Rodriguez forced him to confront the possibility that he had been fundamentally wrong about everything. Sarah stepped forward, her posture unconsciously shifting into the military bearing she had learned during her brief time with the Cape. "Colonel Martinez, I'm not sure why you're here. I haven't been active with my unit for several weeks now." "That's precisely why we're here, Cadet Rodriguez," Major Chen interjected, consulting his tablet. "Your absence was noted at the regional level, which prompted an investigation into your status. When we learned about the circumstances preventing your continued participation, Colonel Martinez felt it was important to address the situation personally." Danny appeared in the doorway behind Sarah, his work clothes marking him as having just returned from the auto shop. Unlike his sister, he had inherited his father's practical nature and immediate wariness of anything that seemed too good to be true. The sight of a military helicopter in their front yard struck him as either the beginning of an incredible opportunity or the start of serious trouble. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation inside," Colonel Martinez suggested, gesturing toward the house. "What we have to discuss is rather sensitive, and I believe your family deserves privacy for this conversation." Miguel nodded numbly, leading the group through the front door and into the modest living room that suddenly felt cramped with the addition of 2 military officers. The coffee table was still covered with Danny's automotive magazines and Sarah's textbooks, mundane reminders of ordinary life that had been interrupted by extraordinary circumstances. Colonel Martinez settled into the worn armchair that had been Miguel's father's favorite spot, while Major Chen remained standing, his tablet ready to document whatever was about to unfold. Sarah perched on the edge of the couch, her nervous energy evident in the way she clasped and unclasped her hands. Miguel remained standing by the window, as if proximity to an escape route might somehow make this surreal situation more manageable. "Mr. Rodriguez," Colonel Martinez began, her tone shifting to one of professional formality, "your daughter has come to our attention through her exceptional performance in the Civil Air Patrol program. In the brief time she was active with her squadron, Cadet Rodriguez demonstrated leadership capabilities and technical aptitude that place her in the top 1% of cadets nationwide." Miguel's skepticism was immediate and obvious. "Top 1%? Colonel, with all due respect, my daughter was only in your program for a few weeks. How could anyone determine something like that in such a short time?" Major Chen stepped forward, consulting his tablet with the precision of someone accustomed to dealing with facts and figures. "Mr. Rodriguez, during Cadet Rodriguez's leadership training weekend, she scored in the 98th percentile on tactical decision-making exercises. Her performance during emergency response simulations was rated as exceptional by 3 separate evaluators. Most significantly, she identified a critical flaw in our standard search and rescue protocols that had been overlooked by experienced personnel." Sarah's eyes widened. She remembered the weekend training exercise, a complex scenario involving a simulated aircraft crash in mountainous terrain. While other cadets had followed established procedures, Sarah had noticed that the standard search pattern would miss a significant area due to terrain features that weren't properly accounted for in the official protocols. She had mentioned it to her instructor almost as an afterthought, never imagining that her observation would be taken seriously. "The protocol modification based on Cadet Rodriguez's insight has already been implemented at the regional level," Colonel Martinez continued. "Early testing suggests it could improve search effectiveness by as much as 15%, which in real-world scenarios could mean the difference between life and death for people in distress." Miguel felt his worldview shifting beneath his feet like sand, For months, he had dismissed Sarah's military interests as childish fantasy, a waste of time and energy that would ultimately lead nowhere. The idea that his 19-year-old daughter had identified a flaw in procedures developed by experienced professionals seemed impossible to accept. "There's more," Major Chen added, turning to a new page on his tablet. "Cadet Rodriguez's academic performance and aptitude test scores have brought her to the attention of the Air Force Academy Admissions Board. Based on her current qualifications, she would be a competitive candidate for appointment to the Academy, with the potential for a full scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and all associated expenses." The financial implications hit Miguel like a thunderbolt. The Air Force Academy was one of the most prestigious institutions in the country, and graduation guaranteed a commission as an officer in the United States Air Force. More importantly, it represented a path to education and career opportunities that would have cost the Rodriguez family hundreds of thousands of dollars if pursued through civilian channels. Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Are you saying I could actually attend the Air Force Academy?" "Not could, Cadet Rodriguez," Colonel Martinez replied with a smile. "Based on your current qualifications and the recommendations we've received, you would be virtually guaranteed an appointment if you choose to pursue it. However, there are time-sensitive elements to the application process that require immediate attention." Miguel's mind raced as he tried to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. The daughter he had accused of chasing impossible dreams was being offered opportunities that most families could only fantasize about. The uniform he had ridiculed as playing dress-up was apparently the gateway to a level of success he had never imagined possible for anyone in his family. "What exactly are you asking of us?" Miguel's voice cracked slightly as he posed the question that would determine his daughter's future. Colonel Martinez leaned forward, her expression serious but encouraging. "We're asking for your permission and support for Sarah to complete her Civil Air Patrol training and begin the Air Force Academy application process. The Academy is looking for candidates who demonstrate not just academic excellence, but leadership potential and a commitment to service. Sarah has shown all of these qualities in remarkable abundance." "But she's just a kid," Miguel protested, though his voice lacked the conviction of his earlier arguments. "She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. How can she commit to a military career when she hasn't experienced anything else?" Major Chen stepped forward again, his tablet displaying what appeared to be statistical information. "Mr. Rodriguez, Academy graduates have opportunities that extend far beyond military service. The leadership training, technical education, and network of contacts they develop open doors in virtually every field imaginable. Fortune 500 companies actively recruit Academy graduates, and many go on to successful careers in business, technology, politics, and public service." More importantly, Colonel Martinez added, "The Academy provides a foundation of character and discipline that serves graduates throughout their lives, regardless of the paths they choose to follow. Your daughter has already demonstrated these qualities. The Academy would simply help her develop them to their full potential." Sarah had been listening to the conversation with growing amazement, but now she found her voice. "Dad, this is what I've been trying to tell you. This isn't a game or a hobby. It's a real opportunity to build something meaningful with my life." Miguel looked at his daughter, seeing her perhaps clearly for the first time in years. The stubborn determination he had criticized as unrealistic suddenly appeared in a new light. Sarah hadn't been chasing fantasies. She had been pursuing a goal with single-minded focus and impressive results. Her refusal to abandon her dreams despite his opposition now seemed less like defiance and more like strength of character. "What would this mean for our family?" Miguel asked, his practical nature asserting itself even as his worldview continued to shift. "If Sarah goes to the Academy, when would we see her? What kind of commitment are we talking about?" Colonel Martinez's expression softened, recognizing the genuine concern behind the question. Academy cadets receive regular leave periods and opportunities to visit home. The commitment after graduation is typically 5 years of active duty service. But many officers choose to make the military a career because of the opportunities and satisfaction it provides. Your daughter would be serving her country while building skills and experience that would benefit her throughout her life. The room fell silent as Miguel struggled to reconcile years of assumptions with the new reality being presented to him. Everything he thought he knew about Sarah's interests had been turned upside down. The daughter he had tried to protect from disappointment was being offered opportunities that exceeded his wildest dreams for any of his children. Danny, who had been quietly observing the conversation, finally spoke up. "Sarah, is this really what you want? Not because it sounds impressive or because these officers are here, but because it's what you actually want to do with your life?" Sarah turned to her brother, grateful for the question that cut through all the official presentations and family drama to the heart of the matter. "Danny, I've known what I wanted since I was 12 years old. Every book I've read, every class I've taken, every hour I've spent working at the diner to pay for flying lessons, it's all been leading to this moment. I want to serve my country, I want to fly, and I want to make a difference in the world." Her words hung in the air with the weight of absolute conviction. Miguel realized that his daughter hadn't been confused or naive about her goals. She had been working toward them with a clarity of purpose that he had never possessed at her age. The girl he had tried to steer toward a safe, predictable path had already chosen a route that would challenge her, change her, and ultimately lead her to achievements he couldn't have imagined. Colonel Martinez stood, recognizing that the family needed time to process everything they had heard. "Mr. Rodriguez, we don't need an answer today, but we do need to begin the application process within the next 2 weeks if Sarah is going to be considered for next year's incoming class. I'll leave my contact information, and I encourage you to discuss this as a family." As the officers prepared to leave, Miguel found himself asking one final question. "Colonel, why did you come here personally? Surely there are other ways to handle recruitment and applications." Colonel Martinez paused at the door, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Rodriguez, in my 23 years of service, I've learned to recognize exceptional potential when I see it. Your daughter possesses qualities that can't be taught: integrity, determination, and natural leadership ability. The Air Force needs officers like Sarah, but more importantly, the world needs leaders like her. I came here personally because I believe she represents the very best of what our military and our country can produce." As the helicopter lifted off from the front lawn, carrying the officers back to their official duties, the Rodriguez family stood together in their living room, surrounded by the echoes of a conversation that had changed everything. Miguel looked at his daughter with new eyes, seeing not the stubborn child who had defied his wishes, but a young woman whose vision had been clearer than his own. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be applications to complete, interviews to navigate, and a family dynamic to rebuild. But for the first time in months, Miguel felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah first announced her military ambitions: hope that his daughter's dreams might actually be within reach. "So," Danny said, breaking the contemplative silence, "I guess we need to talk about this as a family." Sarah nodded, her heart racing with possibilities she was only beginning to understand. The helicopter was already a speck in the distance, but the opportunities it had brought would reshape the Rodriguez family forever. Make sure to subscribe if this story has captured your attention. The next part reveals how Sarah's decision will transform not just her life, but her entire family's understanding of what's possible when you refuse to give up on your dreams. The silence that followed the helicopter's departure was unlike anything the Rodriguez household had ever experienced. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a Sunday afternoon or the peaceful lull after a busy day at the shop. This was the heavy, expectant silence that comes when a family stands at the crossroads of destiny, knowing that whatever they decide in the next few moments will echo through generations. Miguel walked slowly to his favorite armchair, the one his father had bought secondhand in 1987, and sank into its familiar embrace. The worn fabric had witnessed countless family discussions over the years: arguments about Danny's grades, celebrations of small business successes, and heated debates about Sarah's future that now seemed almost prophetic. But nothing had prepared any of them for this moment. Sarah remained standing by the window, watching the last traces of the helicopter disappear beyond the tree line. Her hands trembled slightly as she processed everything that had just occurred. For months, she had endured her father's skepticism and the painful distance it had created between them. Now suddenly her dreams had been validated by people whose opinions carried the weight of the United States military. Danny positioned himself strategically between his father and sister, a role he had unconsciously adopted during the family's recent conflicts. As the peacemaker, he understood both perspectives better than either party realized. He had seen Sarah's unwavering dedication to her goals, but he had also witnessed Miguel's genuine fear that his daughter was setting herself up for disappointment in a world that rarely rewarded dreamers from working-class families. "Dad," Sarah began tentatively, her voice barely above a whisper, "I know this is a lot to process. I know you're probably thinking about a million different things right now. But I need you to understand that this isn't something new for me. This is what I've been working toward since I was in middle school." Miguel's eyes remained fixed on the coffee table, where Colonel Martinez had left her business card alongside a thick packet of information about the Air Force Academy application process. The official seal of the United States Air Force seemed to mock his earlier dismissive attitude toward his daughter's ambitions. How many times had he called her interests playing soldier or expensive hobbies? How many opportunities had his stubborn resistance already cost her? 23 years, Miguel said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. That colonel said she had 23 years of experience, and she came here personally because she thinks you're special. Do you understand what that means, Mija? Sarah moved closer to her father, sensing a crack in the wall of opposition that had defined the relationship for so long. "I think it means that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely wrong about what I could accomplish." The pain in her voice was unmistakable. For months, Sarah had carried the burden of believing in herself, while the person whose approval mattered most remained convinced she was chasing impossible dreams. The validation from Colonel Martinez felt like vindication, but it also highlighted the cost of her father's doubts. Danny cleared his throat, recognizing that someone needed to address the practical concerns that were undoubtedly racing through Miguel's mind. "Sarah, tell us honestly, what does this really mean? If you get accepted to the Air Force Academy, what happens to your life? What happens to our family?" Sarah had been preparing for this conversation in her mind for years, though she had never imagined it would take place under these circumstances. She pulled out her phone and opened a notes app where she had meticulously documented her research about military careers and academy opportunities. "The academy is a 4-year commitment," she began, her voice gaining strength as she shifted into the mode of presentation she had practiced countless times. "During those 4 years, I would receive a world-class education in engineering, leadership, and military science. The value of that education is estimated at over $400,000, and it's completely free." Miguel's eyebrows shot up at the figure. $400,000 represented more money than his auto shop would generate in gross revenue over several years. The idea that his daughter could receive that level of education without putting the family into crushing debt seemed almost too good to be true. "After graduation," Sarah continued, "I would be commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Air Force with a starting salary of approximately $60,000 per year, plus benefits that include healthcare, housing allowances, and continued education opportunities. The initial commitment is 5 years of active duty service." 5 years, Miguel repeated slowly. "That's a long time, Sarah. What if you change your mind? What if you decide you want something different?" Sarah had anticipated this question, and her answer reflected months of careful consideration. "Dad, 5 years is actually a relatively short commitment when you consider what I would gain from it. But more importantly, Air Force officers have opportunities to pursue advanced degrees, often at government expense. Many academy graduates earn master's degrees or even doctoral degrees while serving. The leadership experience and technical training I would receive would prepare me for virtually any career I might want to pursue later." Danny leaned forward, his business-minded nature engaging with the practical aspects of his sister's presentation. "What about the risks, Sarah? Military service isn't just about education and career opportunities. There are real dangers involved." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah had wrestled with this issue extensively, understanding that her parents' fears about military service were rooted in legitimate concerns about her safety and well-being. "You're right, Danny, military service does involve risks, but so does everything worthwhile in life. Dad takes risks every day when he works under cars that could potentially fall. You take risks when you drive to work in morning traffic. The difference is that military service involves calculated risks taken for purposes that extend beyond personal benefit." Miguel looked up at his daughter, seeing an adult where he had been expecting to find a stubborn child. Sarah's response demonstrated a level of maturity and thoughtfulness that forced him to reconsider his assumptions about her decision-making abilities. Besides, Sarah continued, Air Force officers don't automatically deploy to combat zones. Many serve in technical, administrative, or training roles that involve minimal physical risk. And even those who do deploy receive extensive training and support to minimize danger. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming in the driveway. Through the window, they could see Mrs. Rodriguez returning from her Saturday shopping trip with Sarah's grandmother, Abuela Elena. Both women were carrying grocery bags and chatting animatedly, completely unaware of the life-changing conversation that had been taking place in their absence. "Should we tell them?" Danny asked, recognizing that the family discussion was about to become significantly more complicated. Miguel stood up, straightening his coveralls and running a hand through his graying hair. "Your mother and Abuela have a right to know what's happening. This affects all of us." As the two women entered through the kitchen door, their cheerful conversation about weekend dinner plans created a jarring contrast with the serious atmosphere in the living room. Mrs. Rodriguez, Carmen, immediately sensed that something significant had occurred during her absence. "Miguel? What's wrong? You all look like someone died." Carmen's voice carried the concern of a mother who had learned to read her family's moods with uncanny accuracy. "Mammy, you need to sit down," Sarah said gently, helping her grandmother with the grocery bags while Miguel guided Carmen to the couch. "Something incredible happened while you were gone." Abuela Elena, despite being in her 70s, possessed a sharp intelligence that had helped her navigate the challenges of immigration and adaptation to American life. She immediately noticed the official-looking documents on the coffee table and the lingering tension between family members. "¿Qué pasó aquí?" she asked in Spanish, her eyes moving from person to person as she sought to understand the situation. Miguel took a deep breath and began explaining the afternoon's events, starting with the helicopter's arrival and ending with the Air Force Academy opportunity. As he spoke, Carmen's expression shifted from confusion to amazement to something approaching disbelief. "A helicopter? Here? In our front yard?" Carmen's voice rose with each question. "And they came specifically for Sarah?" "Not just for Sarah, Mamie," Danny interjected. "They came because Sarah has been so exceptional that she caught the attention of people at the highest levels of the military." Abuela Elena listened to the entire explanation without interrupting, her weathered hands folded in her lap as she processed information that challenged everything she thought she knew about her granddaughter's future. When Miguel finished speaking, she turned to Sarah with an expression of profound seriousness. "Nieta, tell me something honestly. Is this what your heart wants? Or is this something you think you should want because important people are telling you it's a good opportunity?" The question cut straight to the core of Sarah's motivations, with the precision that only a grandmother could achieve. Sarah knelt beside Abuela Elena's chair, taking her grandmother's hands in her own. "Abuela, do you remember when I was 12 and you taught me to sew? You told me that the most beautiful quilts are made by people who can see the finished pattern even when they're working on just one small piece." Elena nodded, her eyes reflecting the memory of countless afternoons spent teaching her granddaughter traditional crafts and life lessons. "This military career isn't just something I want, it's something I can see clearly, like the pattern in one of your quilts. Every class I've taken, every book I've read, every hour I've spent learning about aviation has been like adding another piece to that pattern. The Air Force Academy isn't the end goal, it's the foundation for everything I want to build with my life." Carmen wiped away tears she hadn't realized were forming. "Sarah, I had no idea you had thought about this so deeply. I thought you were just going through a phase, like when you wanted to be a veterinarian or a teacher." "Those weren't phases, Mammy," Sarah replied gently. "Those were me trying to find a way to serve others while doing work that mattered. The military brings together everything I care about: leadership, service, technology, and the opportunity to make a real difference in the world." Miguel watched this exchange between the women in his family, recognizing that they were discussing concepts he had never fully understood. For him, work had always been about survival and providing for his family. The idea of choosing a career based on passion and purpose rather than immediate practical necessity was foreign to his experience. "But what about the family business?" Miguel asked suddenly, voicing a concern that had been nagging at him throughout the conversation. "Danny can't run the shop alone forever. I had hoped that maybe, eventually, you might come back and help us expand. Sarah's expression softened as she recognized the deeper fear behind her father's question. This wasn't really about the auto shop. It was about family unity and the traditional expectation that children would remain close to home, contributing to the family's collective success. Dad, the shop will always be part of who I am. The work ethic you taught me, the problem-solving skills I learned watching you diagnose engine problems, the customer service principles you demonstrated every day, those things have shaped who I am, but I can honor that foundation while building something different for myself. Besides, Danny added with a slight grin, if Sarah becomes a successful Air Force officer, she might be able to help us expand the business in ways we never imagined. Military connections could open doors to contracts and opportunities we can't even see yet. The suggestion surprised everyone, including Danny himself. But as he thought about it, the idea made sense. Sarah's military career could potentially benefit the entire family in ways that staying home and working at the shop never could. Abuela Elena stood slowly, her movements deliberate despite her age. She walked to the window and gazed out at the front yard where the helicopter had landed just hours earlier. The grass was still flattened in places, physical evidence that the extraordinary visit had actually occurred. Miguel, do you remember why we came to this country? Elena asked without turning around. Of course, Mammy, for opportunities, for a better life. And what did we sacrifice to get those opportunities? Miguel's voice grew quiet. Everything. We left our home, our friends, our extended family. We started over with nothing but hope and determination. Elena turned to face her family, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And now your daughter has an opportunity that we could never have imagined when we made that journey. She has a chance to serve the country that gave us refuge and to achieve things that seemed impossible for people like us. The room fell silent as the weight of Elena's words settled over them. Sarah felt the burden of representing not just her own dreams, but the aspirations of generations who had worked and sacrificed to make this moment possible. Abuela's right, Sarah said finally. This isn't just about me anymore, it's about proving that the sacrifices our family made weren't in vain. It's about showing that immigrants' children can serve at the highest levels of American society. Carmen reached for Miguel's hand, recognizing that they were approaching a decision that would define their family's legacy. What do you think, mi amor? Should we support Sarah's dream? Miguel looked around the room at the faces of the people he loved most in the world. His wife's expression reflected hope mixed with anxiety. His mother's weathered features showed pride tempered by concern. Danny's face revealed excitement about possibilities he was only beginning to understand. And Sarah's eyes held a mixture of determination and vulnerability that reminded him of the little girl who had once announced her intention to fly airplanes when she grew up. Sarah, Miguel said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that would reshape their family forever. If this is truly what you want, then you have our support. All of our support. The words released a flood of emotion that had been building for months. Sarah rushed to embrace her father, feeling barriers that had seemed insurmountable suddenly crumble. Carmen and Danny joined the embrace, while Abuela Elena watched with satisfaction from her position by the window. But, Miguel added, his practical nature asserting itself even in this emotional moment, we do this right. We research everything, we ask every question, and we make sure you're prepared for whatever comes next. Sarah nodded enthusiastically, understanding that her father's support came with conditions that reflected his love and concern for her welfare. Dad, I've been preparing for this for years, but you're right, now we prepare as a family. As evening approached, and the reality of their decision began to settle in, the Rodriguez family found themselves united in a way they hadn't been for months. The path ahead would be challenging, filled with applications and interviews, and the inevitable anxiety of waiting for acceptance. But for the first time since Sarah had announced her military ambitions, they were facing those challenges together. The business card Colonel Martinez had left on the coffee table seemed to glow in the lamplight, a tangible reminder that Sarah's dreams had suddenly become achievable goals. Tomorrow would bring phone calls and paperwork, research and preparation. But tonight, the Rodriguez family would celebrate the courage it takes to pursue the extraordinary. Don't forget to subscribe if you're invested in Sarah's journey, because what happens next will test everything this family believes about sacrifice, success, and the true meaning of the American dream. Monday morning arrived with an urgency that the Rodriguez family had never experienced before. The weekend's extraordinary events had transformed their modest kitchen into an impromptu command center. With Sarah's laptop open on the dining table, surrounded by printed forms, academic transcripts, and a timeline that Carmen had meticulously created to track every deadline and requirement. Congressional nomination deadline, January 15th. Carmen read aloud from her handwritten notes, her reading glasses perched precariously on the end of her nose. Medical examination scheduling window, November 1st through December 31st. Essay submissions, no later than January 31st. Sarah sat across from her mother, a steaming cup of coffee growing cold as she navigated the Air Force Academy's official website. The complexity of the application process was overwhelming, even for someone who had been preparing for this opportunity for years. Every click revealed new requirements, additional forms, and deadlines that seemed designed to test an applicant's organizational skills as much as their academic qualifications. Mommy, look at this, Sarah said, turning her laptop screen toward her mother. They want a complete physical fitness assessment, including specific benchmarks for push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and a timed mile run, plus swimming proficiency tests and something called a candidate fitness assessment that has to be administered by a certified official. Carmen frowned at the screen, trying to process information that was completely outside her experience. Where do we find a certified official? And what if you don't meet these benchmarks on your first try? Miguel emerged from the shower, his hair still damp and his expression showing the lingering effects of a night spent wrestling with doubts and possibilities. The practical side of his nature had spent the dark hours cataloging everything that could go wrong with Sarah's military aspirations, from injury during training to the emotional toll of extended separations from family. "Have you called Colonel Martinez yet?" he asked, pouring himself coffee from the pot that Carmen had started before dawn. "She said we could contact her with questions, and it sounds like we have plenty of them." Sarah had been debating the same question since she woke up at 5:30, unable to sleep due to excitement and anxiety. Part of her worried that calling so soon after their meeting might seem presumptuous or desperate, but another part recognized that Colonel Martinez's offer of assistance had been genuine, and that successfully navigating the application process would require guidance from someone with experience. "I think I should call her this morning," Sarah decided. "But first, let me finish reading through all of these requirements so I can ask intelligent questions, instead of just general panic." Danny appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for work at the auto shop. His presence reminded everyone that life outside of Sarah's Air Force Academy application was continuing as usual, with customers expecting their cars to be repaired and bills that still needed to be paid regardless of military ambitions. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson called the shop last night," Danny reported. "Her transmission is making that grinding noise again, and she wants to know if we can look at it today. Also, Jim Patterson needs an estimate for the bodywork on his pickup truck." Miguel nodded, recognizing that his responsibilities to existing customers couldn't be neglected, even as his family navigated this extraordinary opportunity. The auto shop represented security and stability, qualities that seemed increasingly precious as they ventured into unfamiliar territory. "You handle Mrs. Henderson's car," Miguel instructed. "I'll deal with Patterson's estimate when I get in, but first I want to hear Sarah's conversation with the colonel." The family gathered around Sarah's phone as she dialed the number Colonel Martinez had provided. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Colonel Martinez speaking." "Colonel Martinez, this is Sarah Rodriguez. You visited my family on Saturday afternoon regarding the Air Force Academy opportunity." "Of course, Sarah, I was hoping to hear from you. Have you and your family had a chance to discuss everything we covered?" Sarah glanced around at her parents and brother, drawing strength from their supportive expressions. "Yes, ma'am, we've decided to move forward with the application process. But we're a little overwhelmed by all the requirements and deadlines." Colonel Martinez's laugh was warm and reassuring. "That's completely normal, Sarah. The Academy application process is intentionally comprehensive, because we need to evaluate candidates from every possible angle. But don't worry, we'll walk through it step by step. The first thing you need to understand, the colonel continued, is that you're not doing this alone. Major Chen will serve as your liaison throughout the process, helping coordinate requirements and ensuring you don't miss any critical deadlines. Additionally, your Civil Air Patrol Squadron Commander will be assigned as your application mentor. Sarah felt a surge of relief at the prospect of professional guidance. What should I focus on first? Congressional nomination, Colonel Martinez replied without hesitation. That's often the most challenging aspect of the application process, and it has the earliest deadline. You'll need to contact your representative and both senators to request nomination interviews. Each office has its own process and timeline. Miguel leaned closer to the phone, his businessman's instincts engaging with the procedural aspects of the challenge ahead. Colonel, what exactly is a congressional nomination? How does that work? Mr. Rodriguez, each member of Congress can nominate up to 10 candidates for each academy class. It's a competitive process designed to ensure geographic diversity among academy students. Sarah will need to apply separately to each office, and each office will conduct its own evaluation process. Carmen was taking notes furiously, her handwriting becoming increasingly illegible as she tried to capture every detail. How many nominations does Sarah need? Technically, she only needs one, Colonel Martinez explained. But we strongly recommend applying to all available sources to maximize the chances of success. In Sarah's case, that means applying to Representative Johnson's office and to both Senator Williams and Senator Chen. Sarah felt her confidence wavering as the scope of the challenge became clear. What do these congressional offices look for in candidates? How do I convince them that I'm worth nominating? Leadership, academic excellence, community service, and demonstrated character, Colonel Martinez replied. Based on what I observed during our meeting, and what I know about your Civil Air Patrol performance, you have strong credentials in all of these areas. The key is presenting them effectively. Major Chen will help you prepare application packages that highlight your strengths, the colonel continued. He'll also arrange mock interview sessions to help you practice articulating your goals and motivations. Remember, these congressional offices see hundreds of applications every year. You need to stand out. Danny raised his hand as if he were in a classroom, then realized the absurdity of the gesture and spoke up instead. Colonel, what happens if Sarah gets the nomination but doesn't get accepted to the academy? Or, what if she gets accepted but decides she wants to do something else? The question reflected concerns that had been nagging at the entire family. The application process required significant time and emotional investment, and none of them had experience with pursuing opportunities at this level. Excellent question, Colonel Martinez responded. Congressional nominations don't guarantee academy acceptance, but they're required for consideration. The academy makes the final admissions decisions based on academic qualifications, leadership potential, physical fitness, and character assessments. As for changing her mind, the colonel continued, candidates can withdraw their applications at any point before accepting an appointment. However, once Sarah accepts an appointment and begins classes at the academy, she's making a commitment to complete the program and serve as an Air Force officer. Miguel appreciated the colonel's directness about the stakes involved. What percentage of nominees actually get accepted? It varies by district and the strength of the candidate pool, Colonel Martinez explained. Nationally, the Academy accepts approximately 1,200 new cadets each year from roughly 12,000 applicants. But remember, Sarah's performance has already identified her as an exceptional candidate. Sarah felt the weight of both opportunity and pressure settling on her shoulders. Colonel, I need to ask something honestly. Do you really think I have a realistic chance of getting accepted? Or are you encouraging me to apply because it's your job to recruit candidates? The directness of the question surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. But she needed to know whether the colonel's enthusiasm was based on genuine assessment of her potential or simply professional obligation to expand the applicant pool. Colonel Martinez was quiet for a moment before responding, and when she spoke, her voice carried a note of personal conviction that hadn't been present in her earlier, more official explanations. Sarah, I've been involved in academy recruiting for 8 years. I've met thousands of potential candidates, and I've seen every type of young person you can imagine apply for these programs. Most are qualified, many are impressive, some are exceptional, You fall into that last category. The specific reasons I'm confident in your potential go beyond your test scores or even your Civil Air Patrol performance, she continued. During our conversation on Saturday, I watched how you interacted with your family during a stressful situation. You remained calm, articulate, and respectful even when discussing topics that clearly created tension. That kind of composure under pressure is exactly what we look for in future officers. Miguel found himself nodding as the colonel spoke. Despite his earlier opposition to Sarah's military interests, he had always been proud of his daughter's ability to handle difficult situations with maturity beyond her years. Furthermore, Colonel Martinez added, your technical insight during that Civil Air Patrol exercise wasn't just luck or good guessing. You identified a genuine flaw in established procedures because you were thinking critically about the problem rather than simply following instructions. That kind of analytical thinking is precisely what the Academy aims to develop in its graduates. Sarah felt a surge of confidence mixed with responsibility. What's the next step, Colonel? Major Chen will contact you later today to schedule a meeting for tomorrow afternoon. He'll bring sample applications, timeline charts, and contact information for the congressional offices. He'll also arrange for you to take a preliminary physical fitness assessment so we can identify any areas that need improvement. One more thing, Colonel Martinez added. I want you to start keeping a detailed journal of this entire process. Document your thoughts, concerns, challenges, and victories. If you're accepted to the Academy, that journal will help you remember why you chose this path during the difficult moments that every cadet experiences. After ending the call, the Rodriguez family sat in contemplative silence. The conversation had transformed Sarah's Air Force Academy dreams from abstract possibility into concrete action items, with specific deadlines and measurable requirements. Carmen consulted her notes, which now covered 3 pages in her careful handwriting. Sarah, we need to create a calendar with all of these deadlines clearly marked, and we should probably set up a filing system for all the paperwork. Miguel stood up, straightening his work clothes as he prepared to head to the auto shop. I'm proud of you for asking the colonel those direct questions, Mija. This is too important to base on false encouragement or unrealistic expectations. But I'm also scared, Sarah admitted, voicing a fear she had been trying to suppress. What if I go through all of this and don't get accepted? What if I'm not as special as everyone seems to think? Danny moved to sit beside his sister, recognizing the vulnerability behind her confident exterior. Sarah, you've been working toward this goal since middle school. You've overcome every obstacle, including Dad's opposition, and you've impressed people who evaluate candidates for a living. Even if the worst happened, and you didn't get accepted, you'd still be the same person who identified flaws in search and rescue protocols and scored in the top percentiles on leadership assessments. Abuela Elena, who had been quietly listening from the kitchen doorway, shuffled forward with the wisdom that came from 8 decades of life experience. Nieta, fear is not your enemy. Fear means you understand how much this opportunity means to you. The people who succeed are not the ones who feel no fear. They are the ones who feel fear and choose to act anyway. Sarah hugged her grandmother, drawing strength from the woman who had faced far greater uncertainties when she left everything familiar behind to build a new life in America. You're right, Abuela. This is scary because it matters. Exactly, Elena replied. And now we work to make sure you're ready for whatever comes next. As Miguel prepared to leave for the shop, he paused at the kitchen door and looked back at his family. The scene before him, his wife organizing paperwork, his son offering encouragement, his mother providing wisdom, and his daughter preparing to pursue extraordinary goals, represented everything he had worked to achieve since arriving in America as a young man. Sarah, he said quietly, your abuela is right about fear, but I want you to know something else. No matter what happens with this academy application, you've already made me proud. You've shown courage, determination, and vision that I didn't recognize before. That's worth celebrating regardless of outcomes. Sarah felt tears welling up as she recognized the magnitude of her father's admission. For months, his approval had seemed impossible to earn. Now, at the beginning of the most challenging pursuit of her life, she finally had the support she had been longing for. Thank you, Dad, that means everything to me. As Miguel left for work and Danny finished his breakfast, Sarah and Carmen settled in for a morning of organizing, planning, and preparing for Major Chen's visit. The dining table remained covered with forms and timelines, but now it represented possibility rather than overwhelming complexity. Sarah opened her laptop and created a new document titled Air Force Academy Journey, Day 1. Following Colonel Martinez's suggestion, she began documenting her thoughts and feelings about the process she was beginning. Today I start the application process for the Air Force Academy, she typed. I'm terrified and excited and grateful all at the same time. For the first time in months, my whole family is supporting my dreams. Whatever happens next, I won't be facing it alone. Carmen looked over her daughter's shoulder at the screen, smiling at the mix of determination and vulnerability in Sarah's words. What do you think will be the hardest part of all this? Sarah considered the question carefully. Honestly, I think the hardest part will be maintaining confidence when things get difficult. This process is designed to test every aspect of who I am as a person. There will be moments when I doubt myself, and I'll need to remember why I started this journey. Then we'll help you remember, Carmen said simply. That's what families do. As mother and daughter worked together to organize the application materials, both understood that they were embarking on something that would test not just Sarah's qualifications, but the entire family's ability to support each other through uncertainty and challenge. The road to the Air Force Academy would be long and demanding, but for the first time since Sarah had announced her military ambitions, the Rodriguez family was traveling that road together. If this story resonates with your own dreams of overcoming obstacles and family doubts, make sure you're subscribed, because Sarah's journey is about to get much more intense as she faces her first real test. 3 months after that life-changing helicopter landing, Sarah Rodriguez stood in the gleaming corridors of the Hart Senate Office Building in Washington, D.C., her dress uniform pressed to perfection and her heart hammering against her ribs. The congressional nomination process had proven even more rigorous than Colonel Martinez had warned, requiring 3 separate application packages and countless evenings of preparation. Miss Rodriguez, the receptionist, called. Senator Williams will see you now. Senator Williams' office was a study in understated power, with photographs depicting the senator alongside presidents and military leaders spanning decades of public service. Behind an imposing mahogany desk sat a woman whose silver hair and sharp eyes suggested someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions of lives. Cadet Rodriguez, Senator Williams began, consulting Sarah's thick application folder. I've been reviewing your materials, and I must say they're quite impressive. Your Civil Air Patrol commanders speak of you in terms usually reserved for candidates with years more experience. Thank you, Senator. The Civil Air Patrol has provided me with opportunities to develop leadership skills while serving my community. Every search and rescue exercise has reinforced my conviction that military service represents the best way for me to contribute to something larger than myself. The senator leaned back, studying Sarah with intensity. Tell me about a time when you had to make a difficult decision under pressure, where the stakes were high and you had limited information. Sarah chose to share an experience from her Civil Air Patrol training. During a simulated aircraft search exercise, our team leader suffered a severe allergic reaction. We were 20 miles from the nearest road, communication equipment was malfunctioning, and we had responsibility for coordinating with other search teams. I had to decide whether to abort the mission or establish a temporary command structure while arranging medical evacuation. I chose to delegate leadership responsibilities, called for emergency extraction, and maintained mission continuity through new communication protocols. The interview continued for 45 minutes, covering topics from international conflicts to the role of technology in modern warfare. Each question probed deeper, forcing Sarah to demonstrate wisdom beyond her years. What would you say to critics who argue that military academies are anachronisms in an age of technological warfare? The senator asked. Senator, I believe that criticism misunderstands the nature of leadership. Technology enhances human capabilities but cannot replace human judgment, ethical reasoning, or the ability to inspire others during challenging circumstances. Military academies develop leaders who can integrate technology with human insight to achieve objectives that serve our national interests and values. Senator Williams closed the folder and stood, extending her hand with a slight smile. Miss Rodriguez, you'll hear from my office within 2 weeks. Regardless of the outcome, you've represented yourself and your family with distinction today. 2 weeks later, Sarah was working the evening shift at the diner when her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown Washington number. Her hands trembled as she stepped into the kitchen, knowing this moment would determine whether months of preparation had been successful. Miss Rodriguez? This is Senator Williams's office. The senator has asked me to inform you that you have been selected to receive her nomination for appointment to the United States Air Force Academy. Sarah gripped the prep counter to steady herself. After months of uncertainty, one of the most significant hurdles had been cleared. She was now an official nominee for Academy admission. That evening, the Rodriguez family gathered in their living room, the same space where Colonel Martinez had first explained Sarah's potential. Miguel held the official nomination letter in his weathered hands, reading the formal language that designated his daughter as a congressional nominee. "Mija," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you an apology. For months I fought against your dreams because I was afraid. Afraid you would be disappointed, afraid you would fail. But I was wrong about everything except one thing. You are exceptional." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Dad, you weren't wrong to be concerned. This path is risky, and there are no guarantees. But you taught me that anything worth having requires hard work and sacrifice." Carmen wiped away her own tears. "Sarah, what happens next?" "Now I wait for the Academy's decision," Sarah explained. "They'll review my complete application and determine whether to offer me an appointment. If accepted, I'll report to Colorado Springs in late June for 6 weeks of intensive military training." Danny spoke up with characteristic practicality. "What are the odds, Sarah? Realistically, what are your chances?" "According to Major Chen, nominees with my credentials have about a 70% acceptance rate, but that still means 3 out of 10 qualified nominees don't get accepted." Abuela Elena approached her granddaughter slowly. "Nieta, regardless of what happens with the Academy, you have already achieved something remarkable. You have proven that our family's sacrifices were not in vain, that the dreams we carried from El Salvador can come true in America." The elderly woman's words carried the weight of generational perspective. But more importantly, you have shown courage in pursuing your vision even when others doubted you. That courage will serve you well, regardless of which path your life takes. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Martinez. "Congratulations on your nomination. The Academy decision should come within 4 to 6 weeks. Remember, you've already proven yourself exceptional." "What will you do while we wait?" Carmen asked. "Continue training, maintain my grades, and keep serving with the Civil Air Patrol," Sarah replied. "Academy admissions committees sometimes reconsider applications based on candidates' performance during the waiting period." Miguel nodded approvingly. "And if you don't get accepted?" "Several universities have offered me ROTC scholarships based on my Academy nomination. It's a different path, but it would still lead to military service and flight training." As the evening wound down, Sarah stepped outside onto the front porch where the helicopter had landed months earlier. The winter air was crisp and clear, with stars visible despite the suburban lights. She opened her journal app and began typing, "Today I received my congressional nomination to the Air Force Academy." The girl who was once told her military dreams were unrealistic is now an official nominee for one of the most competitive institutions in America. More importantly, my family finally understands that supporting each other's dreams makes everyone stronger. The next few weeks will test my patience as I wait for the Academy's decision. But regardless of the outcome, I've already accomplished something meaningful. I've proven that working-class families can pursue extraordinary opportunities, that daughters can chart their own courses, and that dreams backed by preparation and persistence can overcome the most daunting obstacles. Sarah closed the journal and looked up at the stars, imagining herself among them as a future Air Force pilot. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time since this journey began, she felt completely confident in her ability to handle whatever came next. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.